most important topic, that is the autopsy. So let's start. At the end of the lecture, the students will be able to describe what is autopsy, aims and objectives of the autopsy, types of autopsy, difference between medical, legal, and pathological autopsy, autopsy protocol, and legal formalities. So let's do this. So beta, what basically is autopsy? Autopsy is like, synonyms for the autopsy in the different part of the world. They use the different terminologies for it. Like somewhere they said that the post-mortem, somebody says that is necropsy, somebody says that thanatopsy. So these are the synonyms for the autopsy. What is autopsy is? बेटा, two people are waiting in the room. ये मेरे पास एक बार-बार message show हो रहा है. Okay. So basically what the autopsy is, auto means is self and opis means to view. So means self-examination, to view or to examine by oneself. ठीक है? It may be defined as the detailed scrutiny of both external surface and internal content of the dead body after opening its cavities, including further examination such as histology, biochemistry, and toxicological collection of the materials from the body. Like, we will send that the tissues for that the histological study. We take that the any kind of the fluid or that tissues for the biochemistry and that the toxicological analysis to rule out the cause of the death. Or the scientific examination of dead body under the law of the state to assist the identification and prosecution of the guilty in case of unnatural death. Okay, so necropsy, again, it means necro means dead and opsy means examine to see, to examination of the dead. Thanatopsy means thanatos, again means dead, or the opsy means to view. So there are, autopsy has the multiple types. We divide them into to see or examine that the body. We can do it for the purpose of medical, clinical, pathological, or the hospital autopsy to rule out that the cause of the death, in cases of the clinical trials, sometimes to look for that the internationally, whenever that the death occurs in the hospital, they send that the body for that the pathological autopsy. Anatomical autopsy, it's again that the part of the autopsy which usually being done previously in the form of dissection to let the student learn about that the normal linings and the structures and original insertions of the muscles and placements of the viscera. Psychological autopsy, again, I'm going to tell it in you briefly: post-mortem examination, virtual autopsy, and the medico-legal autopsy. The forensic people are basically concerned with this, the last one, the medico-legal autopsy. Medical or the academic autopsy, carried on the patient who dies in the hospital during the course of the treatment. As I told you, that it's being done in the multiple, all over the world. कि जब भी कोई भी clinical deaths होती हैं, that the patient dies in the hospital, they perform to look for that the reason or that the effects of the treatment, that either that the drug has done that some sort of the adverse or doesn't give any kind of effect over the body. So evaluate and make their statics more stronger by performing this. Though unluckily we don't have such pattern here in Pakistan. We don't follow that the clinical autopsy because of the religious beliefs कि जी नई body है उसकी बेइज्जती ना हो. So because of that reason, in our part of the world, we usually don't go for that the clinical autopsy, and people refrain or give that the have that the things bad about that to perform that the autopsies. So what are the objectives of that? The clinical autopsy to determine the cause of the death, to confirm or establish the clinical diagnosis, what was the reason behind, to evaluate the effect of the treatment given during the life, performed by the pathologist with the consent of the relatives. Consent is very, very, very much important in any kind of the procedure, but medico-legally, I'm going to tell you, where that it's not important. Okay? So here you need that the consent of the relative. If they refuse to to give the consent for that the autopsy, the one cannot perform the autopsy. Okay. Then the anatomical autopsy. It is performed to study the normal structure of the human body, mostly on unclaimed dead bodies. When the bodies become unclaimed and we cannot match that the data from the NADRA as well, and it will passes up like about a month. So we just preserve that the bodies. And previously what we do कि जी उनको cold storage में रखा जाता था. We just make them preservatives डाल के उसको embalming करके. So we just preserve that body, and they were used being in that the dissecting room for the anatomical purpose to teach the student that the normal course of anatomy, basically the original insertion of the muscles, layers, and the ligaments, and the viscera, and each and every single thing. So that examination usually being done by the anatomist, and the medical student perform this, because it was the part of of the curriculum in the previous year. But because of certain issues, now it's being it's not being adopted here, because of the advancement. Ab to aapko pata hai कि virtually we have that the multiple software by which we can learn that the anatomical things. And only the drawback of this thing was that because these are unclaimed body, so you never know which sort of infection the body is carrying with it. ठीक है ना? So that is the only issue. That is the reason that the PMC has been stopped or such sort of that the practice, and they just took it out from that the curriculum. When previously with that time when I just done my MBBS, I did the same. We had that the bodies, and we have to perform we have to look for that. When we were just studying the upper limb, we have to go for it. We had that the body for that. After having the session, they put that the body again to the cold storage. Then again with the next day we will get that the body. So that was the part of the curriculum previously. Then the psychological autopsy. Psychological autopsy, it is undertaken on the alleged case of suicide to know about the mental status of the deceased at the time of death. Please kindly follow the proper definition, as yesterday even I took the exam of the third year, and people were unable to give the proper definition of of the psychological autopsy. It usually undertaken on the alleged case of suicide and look for the mental status of deceased at the time of death. ठीक है ना? तो ये आपको पता होना चाहिए कि the person is already dead. Suicidal cases when the person dies, we have to, when the case is being diagnosed, or you just make your assumptions that it is suicide, or when you diagnose that thing by your findings that it was the case of the suicide, then again you need to look for the psychological status of that disease by interviewing the relatives. What was the reason? How was his personality? So these things can be asked by means of family members, friend, professional colleagues, teachers, and physicians. Not the police, because here the statement is going to become biased if you will just look for the case of suicide. It is performed about the background of the person, his habits, mental status, personality, characters, relation to the others. Psychological autopsy, I had the one case of a young girl who has been abused by his father, and she committed the suicide. And they come up to know कि जी उसका affair था, ये था, वो था, फलाना था. But then finally, after scrutinizing the things by we did that, that is the first time we conducted that. We did the trial for the psychological autopsy. We start interviewing her friends and family. Then out of sudden we came up to know कि उसके एक friend से पता चला कि she was just has the habit of writing the diary. Then we asked the investigating officer to again scrutinize or look for that diary. Then finally they found that diary under her mattress, and the whole history was there for purposeful, like, that why she committed that the suicide, because he was being abused by her, like, her stepfather. So this is really very fruitful, but here again, we usually don't go for such kind of that the exotic, like, exotic sort of practice. Once they come to us, because hum interview khud nahi kar sakte, like, we give the trial, like, once. Then the postmortem examination. Postmortem examination of the external surface of the corpse by inspection without giving incision for the systemic examination. So postmortem terminology, even we use कि जी हम कहते हैं कि जी postmortem करने जाना है, तो postmortem का basic maksad, it's not that the performing the entire autopsy. It basically means कि that is the examination of the external surface of the corpse, inspection without giving incision for the systemic examination. However, specimens of body fluid like blood, bile, urine may be collected. Okay, we look for that the externally examination, like look for that the rigidity देख लिया आपने, if you have done the death, so you know कि rigidity है, lividity देख लिया, that will give you that the time since death, any kind of the abrasion marks, that will give you the idea कि the body has been dragged out, grazes देख लिया आपने, या फिर कोई आपको कोई भी ऐसा चीज evidence which will give that the which will give that the plus point to your examination, which will support your diagnosis कि जी what was the reason or the cause of the death you observe from that body. ठीक है, जैसे कि cadaveric spasm है, sometimes you got that things like things in the fist of the person, like beard hair हो गया कोई इस के, that is again that the case which I have been witnessed के family में ही उन्होंने उनके one of his brother-in-law murdered that lady, and they put that the created the scene like as that somebody just the theft has been done, somebody came in and they smashed her head and done the robbery. But after performing the autopsy, we found that the cadaveric spasm, and when we opened the hand, there was that the beard hair was there. So after that, like DNA of that hair, we came up to know that was belongs to one of his brother-in-law who did that thing, so he's still in the prison. So these are the corporate sort of the evidences which help you out and to make your diagnosis. Then the virtual autopsy, that is the advanced technique, though it's very costly and expensive. That is the reason we are not doing here, because it will cost a lot. Normal CT and MRIs, at Dow it usually costs like 8,000 or 10,000. But in this sort of autopsy, that is very helpful in cases for performing the autopsy, that is virtual autopsy or the autopsy, because in this we can see that any of the minor injuries, minor kind of the fractures, and even that the visceral injuries, any kind of the ruptures can easily be sorted out. Any kind of that the vessels can be easily any kind of that the embolisms can easily be detected out by this mean. It is a new and non-intrusive. Please, again, I'm emphasizing on the definitions. Please, आप लोग definitions proper नहीं बताते हो. That is the reason you got that the less score. Only that the sometimes concept doesn't work. You need to say a little much more. ठीक है? It is a new and non-intrusive form of performing autopsy. The system utilizes a computer tomography or CT or the MRI, magnetic resonance imaging unit, to obtain a detailed view of the body. Here, the MRI image and detailed X-rays are combined to create a full three-dimensional view of the body, which the forensic pathologist and medical examiner can use to examine the state of the blood vessels, organs, bones, and tissues of the body, and thus determining the cause and manner in which the patient dies. Virtual autopsy can even bring to light some crucial information regarding the body that is difficult or time consuming to acquire using conventional method, because sometimes you missed and put that your autopsy goes in the negative or the obscure one. But this is that the technique in which you can see that all the minor details which usually being missed at the time of performing that physical autopsy. Hope I'm not going very fast. The other, that is the one which is very important, which the subject I belongs from, that is the medico-legal autopsy. That is the essential examination of the dead body to rule out or establish foul play in death. So it is performed in pursuance of the law to establish the cause and manner of the death, and also to establish or rule out foul play. It is performed under Section 174 Criminal Proceeding Code (PPC) CRPC of Pakistan and Police Rule 1934 Section 25.34 and 25.36. These are the important rules. ठीक है ना कि किसके अंदर ये परफॉर्म होता है? CRPC है, Criminal Procedural Codes के थ्रू पाकिस्तान में, and the Police Rule under 1934 Section 25.34 and 25.36. ठीक है? So now come to that, the difference between the legal, medico-legal, and the pathological autopsy. Medico-legal autopsy basically is done or required to agencies appointed by the government to investigate in case of unnatural, sudden, or suspicious death. Here in Pakistan, we have, like, in Punjab, they have the separate system that lies under the Department of the Forensic Medicine. But here in Sindh, we have the medico-legal systems, like, we have police surgeon office, where usually, like, doctors got appointed as the medico-legal officer, and it's their duty. But in cases of the custodial death, the specialists like we people, like, who are in the academics of the forensic medicine, being called upon and, like, give the request that the letter of authorization to perform the autopsy and give our expert views. So normally that the autopsies, whenever that they comes under the police surgeon office, the medical legal officer, आपके जैसे student जो के MBBS करके निकलते हैं, when they sit for the like commissions, some of them being appointed as the medical legal officer, some being appointed as medical officers. So it totally depends upon the requirement of that time. So आप लोग by default भी you can fall, like, at the department of the medical legal system. So that is the reason, like, to train you guys up till this level, that you should know that the background knowledge, that what the things you have to look there. Okay, so this is the medical legal autopsy. Then the pathological autopsy kya hai? Basically, pathological autopsy is done on patients dying in a big hospital after taking treatment or in case where diagnosis could not be made till death. ठीक है, so internationally तो ये religiously follow होता है, but in Pakistan it totally, because here you don't need that the consent, ठीक है, permission from that the relative is not required. Here you need that the permission for the relative to confirm the clinical diagnosis is required. The clinician pathologists usually convince that the relatives get to rule out and is going to give the like benefit to the other coming patients with the same kind of the sign and symptoms. न्यू ड्रग ट्रायल्स के लिए आप ये चीजें जो है बाहर की कंट्रीज में बहुत रिलीजियसली फॉलो की जाती हैं, बट हियर इन पाकिस्तान वी डोंट हैव दैट एडवांस्ड, और बिकॉज ऑफ द माइंडसेट ऑफ द लिविंग पीपल हियर, लोग पैथोलॉजिकल ऑटोप्सीज पे जाते नहीं और हम ऑफर भी नहीं करते हैं. ठीक है. Identity of the dead body is usually not known in case of the medical legal autopsy. So first, आपका जो सबसे पहला काम होता है to establish the identity before that the cause of the death. ठीक है. Identity of the dead body is known from the case sheet in the ward where he was admitted. ठीक है जी. Cause of the death is mostly unknown. Cause of the death is usually known from the case sheet in the ward. Time since death is usually not known because we have to establish with our observation, as like that the chapter of the death you will have like read के different time frames होते हैं जिसके अंदर से हम rule out करते हैं. ठीक है ना, वो देखे जाते हैं. ठीक है. The exact time since death is known from the note sheet of the case, like as being told by the doctor. Then the external findings are of vital importance. As I already told you कि जी सबसे पहले आप external examination करते हैं. External findings are not of that the importance in the skin manifestations of the systemic disease. All the three major cavities, that is head, thorax, and abdomen, are opened. ठीक है. Spinal column is only being opened like in the certain cases, like in that the traumatic cases, like RTAs हैं, उसके अलावा certain poisons हैं, and the cause of unknown death, जो आपके पास कभी भी ऐसा आता है जिसमें आप rule out नहीं कर पा रहे, then you go for that spinal opening, like, because it's a tough and lengthy procedure. Only the cavities containing the disease organ is open. It is valid documentary evidence in the court of law. Once it's gonna be that the autopsy report is established, it is valid document. ठीक है, documentary evidence बन जाता है in the court of the law. ठीक है जी. It is not a valid documentary evidence in the court of law. So the objectives of the medical legal autopsy now come to that the basic topic, because now that was the differences which that the multiple areas where that the autopsy is being performed. Now come to the exact topic, that is the medical legal autopsy. So what are the objectives of the medical legal autopsy? Why we perform the medical legal autopsy? To establish or determine identity of the deceased, to establish cause and manner of the death. ठीक है, आप आइडेंटिफाई करते हैं कि कॉज क्या था, ठीक है, मैनर क्या है, ठीक है, टू एस्टेब्लिश एंड रूल आउट ऑफ द फाउल प्ले, कि what was the reason behind, to determine the time since death. आप बता सकते हैं कि जी death इस time duration पे हुई है, to identify the weapon or the poison response for the death. In case of the newborn infant, to determine issue of the life or stillbirth and the viability. ठीक है, it also established, like, the cause, कि जी infant die था, किस तरह से determine the life था, stillbirth था, or age of the viability can also be established by performing the medical legal autopsy. Prerequisites or the formalities of the autopsies. ठीक है, तो prerequisites में जो है आपके पास क्या आता है, visit of the crime scene. Internationally, the experts usually, like, coroners, that comes under that the coroners, so they do visit prior to performing the autopsy to the crime scene. ठीक है, transportation of the corpse, but here in Pakistan, we are, like, we are doing that the very tough job, because we never visit that the crime scene. We had that the only the postmortem challan, or that the FIR, like FIR report, through which we establish, like, or assume, or we map up the things in our mind कि जी ये हुआ होगा, ठीक है ना. और पिक्टोरियल अगर वो ले आते हैं पुलिसमैन, जो आपका इन्वेस्टिगेटिंग ऑफिसर होता है, तो वो आप देके चीजों को एस्टेब्लिश करते हैं. ट्रांसपोर्टेशन ऑफ द कॉर्प्स, ठीक है, फ्रॉम द क्राइम सीन उसको ट्रांसपोर्ट किया जाता है. रजिस्ट्रेशन ऑफ द डेड बॉडी, स्टोरेज ऑफ द डेड बॉडी, लीगल फॉर्मेलिटीज, दैट इज द मोस्ट इम्पोर्टेंट पार्ट. एंड every time when I took that the last exam, or I took that the yesterday exam, people were failed to tell me that the legal formalities, जो कि मैं बहुत अच्छी तरीके से पढ़ाती हूँ, लेकिन वो I don't know कि आप लोग उसको क्यों mix up कर देते हैं. Other formalities, place of performing autopsy, ठीक है, these are the pre-autopsy formalities. Visit of the crime scene, not done in our country, ठीक है, but in the European countries, the autopsy surgeon or the coroner's visit at the crime scene, as I already told you. The action done there, cordoning of the scene, ठीक है, position in relation to the surrounding object, presence of or position of the weapon, blood stain, marks of a struggle, preservation of the footprints and other trace evidences. And the major thing is that which helped them out is the proper photography. DSLR जो है उनके advanced होते हैं, proper photography of that the crime scene. Then the dead body should be transported to the mortuary, wrapped in that the plastic bag, ठीक है, tied on both ends with all its belongings. जो कुछ भी है, जो भी उसने wear किया हुआ है, जो चीजें उसके साथ हैं, as it is wrap up करके बैग में उसको ले जाया जाता है. ठीक है. On receipt of the corpse, authorized staff should make entries in 2 registers. ठीक है ना. जैसे ही बॉडी रिसीव की जाती है, 2 रजिस्टर्स होते हैं वहां पे. जनरल रजिस्टर मॉर्ग में, जनरल रजिस्टर एंड द ऑटोप्सी रजिस्टर. कॉलम ऑफ द जनरल रजिस्टर्स क्या होते हैं, उसमें एक सीरियल नंबर होता है, डेट एंड टाइम ऑफ द रिसिप्ट ऑफ द कार्ड होता है, नेम एंड आइडेंटिटी ऑफ द आईडी ऑफ द डिसीज्ड होता है. ठीक है, इफ नोन. अननोन है तो अननोन लिखेंगे. नेम एंड नंबर ऑफ द पुलिस ऑफिसर एंड हिज पुलिस स्टेशन. जो अकम्पनी कर रहा है, यू नीड टू टेक दैट द ऑफिसर्स नेम, उसका बेल्ट नंबर होता है, बकल नंबर उस पर दी हुई होती है, वो आप लिखते हैं. डेट एंड टाइम ऑफ डिलीवरी और रिटर्न बैक ऑफ द कॉर्प्स टू द पुलिस. जब इसके बाद एक प्रोसीजर होता है, देन आफ्टर दैट जब आप उसे रिवर्ट बैक करें तो वो भी आप एक कॉलम होता है जिसके अंदर एंटर करते हैं। देन द कॉलम ऑफ द ऑटोप्सी रजिस्टर, ठीक है ना। पहले तो आपने जनरल रजिस्टर के कॉलम्स देख लिए, फिर आपने एक ऑटोप्सी रजिस्टर में एंटर किया, ठीक है। बायोडेटा ऑफ द डिसीज्ड इफ इट्स बीइंग नोन टू यू, ठीक है। ईयरली नंबर कौन सा है, कौन सी ऑटोप्सी परफॉर्म हो रही है साल की, ठीक है। ऑटोप्सी नंबर कौन सा है, साल का नंबर क्या है, नेम डेट एंड टाइम ऑफ द ऑटोप्सी, किस वक्त आपने परफॉर्म किया, डिटेल अबाउट द स्पेसिमेन कलेक्टेड विद द नेम एंड नंबर, ठीक है। आपने उसके साथ जैसे ही नाम और नंबर के साथ आपने कलेक्शन जो भी किया वो उन सारे चीज़ों के आप उसको एंट्री करेंगे, डेट एंड टाइम ऑफ डिस्पैच ऑफ द स्पेसिमेन एंड नेम ऑफ द लैब वे सेंड, जिस लैब में ये कलेक्टेड स्पेसिमेन भेजे जा रहे हैं उसको भी आप मेंशन करेंगे, एंड प्रोविजनल और द फाइनल कंक्लूजन रिगार्डिंग टू द कॉज ऑफ डेथ, ठीक है ना। फिर आप उसमें अपनी प्रॉपर प्रोविजनल जो है डायग्नोसिस बना के उसमें दे देते हैं। इफ इट्स unknown, like you were just waiting for that these specimens to be come out and rule out or to just endorse your diagnosis, तो आप उसका वेट करेंगे, ठीक है ना, till that the like आप उसमें लिखते हैं comments reserved, ठीक है, till that the lab investigations will come, ठीक है। Storage of the dead body. Storage कैसे की जाती है? There are the two types of the storage. Pre-autopsy. Pre-autopsy means कि short term अगर storage करनी है तो that is +4 degree centigrade पे, ठीक है ना, for the purpose of the autopsy. And the post-autopsy long term पे अगर आपने रखना है at that is -20 degree centigrade for the preservation. ठीक है जी। लेकिन जब once you got the body from that like you know from that morgue or the cold storage, then you need to look for like 3 to 4 hours for the proper thawing of the body, ठीक है, ताकि जो कोल्ड स्टिफनिंग है वो आपकी राइगर से जो है वो कहीं पे भी कन्फ्लिक्ट ना क्रिएट करे। और अगर आप उसका वेट नहीं कर रहे हैं then you cannot comment on the Riger based time since death, ठीक है, फिर आप उस पर कमेंट नहीं कर सकते, ठीक। प्रॉपर थोइंग का टाइम आप जरूर लिखते हैं कि यू रेस्ट द बॉडी टिल दैट द प्रॉपर थो कि आपने उसको, ठीक है। उसके बाद जो राइगर अपीयर होगा फिर आप वो देखेंगे कि राइगर कहाँ पे है, ठीक। लीगल फॉर्मेलिटीज एंड द ऑटोप्सी प्रोटोकॉल, स्क्रूटनी ऑफ द ये दिस इज द इम्पोर्टेंट एस्पेक्ट जो कि आपके पेपर में हमेशा आता है और जिसको आप स्टार्ट करते हैं क्राइम सीन से। दैट इज नॉट दैट दी स्टार्टेड विद द क्राइम सीन, लीगल फॉर्मेलिटीज always start from here, like these are the 5 points which comes under that the legal formalities of the autopsy protocol, ठीक है। rest of the things these are the prerequisites of the autopsy हो गए, ठीक है ना, ट्रांसपोर्टेशन हो गया, रजिस्ट्रेशन हो गया, ये आपके प्रोटोकॉल हैं, ठीक है, autopsy protocol, but legal formalities for the autopsy protocol are these only 5, ठीक है। that is the scrutiny of the police paper, ठीक है, ऑथराइजेशन ऑर्डर फ्रॉम द पुलिस और द कोर्ट, जो आपके नाम पे लेटर आता है, द लेटर यू हैव रिसीव्ड ऑन योर नेम कि यू आर द person Dr. A, B, C, D, whosoever you are is authorized to perform that the autopsy of such and such deceased with the number this is this, ठीक है। So scrutiny of these papers में ये सारी चीजें होती है। Then you go for the inquest report, ठीक है, the inquest report being prepared by the investigating officer जो उसने पूरा क्राइम सीन से लेके पूरा स्टोरी राइट अप किया होता है, आप वो देखते हैं। उसके साथ अगर इफ ही हैज द पिक्चर्स अलोंग विद इट वो भी आप चेक करते हैं। द कॉपी ऑफ द FIR, ठीक है, किसी ने FIR लॉन्च हुई है वो आप उसको चेक करते हैं। फॉर्म अलिफ बे जीम, ये मैं आपको बताती हूँ, I'll let you know कि क्या है ये। देन द इनिशियल MLC, ठीक है, मेडिको लीगल चालान जो होता है वो आप देखते हैं। ट्रीटमेंट नोट अगर उसका कोई साथ लगा हुआ है या हॉस्पिटल नोट है, देन यू लुक फॉर ऑल दीज थिंग्स, लैब्स, एक्सरेज, MRI एक्सेट्रा, जो भी रिपोर्ट्स हैं अलोंग विद दैट पुलिस पेपर में लगे हुए होंगे सारी चीजें, ठीक है। एनी ऑपरेशनल नोट्स इफ any, ठीक है, you have to scrutinize all these papers, must be examined and signed, ठीक है। After scrutinizing all these papers, the medico-legal officer has to sign these documents, ठीक है, और start performing its work. Authorization is the major important thing कि किस तरह से आती है। हमने कहा कि कोर्ट में आता
प्यारा लहरा, oh my God, प्यारा, देखो देखो देखो,
हेलो
कोई स्टूडेंट है अनम्यूट हुआ हुआ है somebody is shouting like okay जी type of case who's that student टाइप ऑफ द केसेस रूटीन केसेस अगर आपके पास आ रहे हैं लाइक एक्सीडेंट का केस है सुसाइड का केस है देन ऑथराइजिंग ऑफिसर कौन आपको ऑथराइज कर सकता है दैट इज द पुलिस सब इंस्पेक्टर एंड द स्टेशन हाउस ऑफिसर एसएचओ एएसआई ठीक है होमोसाइड डेथ्स homicide deaths के अंदर homicide deaths if the foul play is being like being suspected then like circle police officer like DCP and ACPs they can like they can order like give the authorization they have that the authorization to ask for that the autopsy in cases of the exhumation death in prison police custody or while police firing then the authorization letter being established from that the executive magistrate or by means of the court ठीक है वो आपके आपके पास आता है then number 2 dead body challan dead body challan क्या है it is requisition submitted by the investigating police officer to a medical man while handing over the body for performing autopsy. It contains the name, age, sex, religion of the deceased, as well as suspected cause of death and the purpose for which the body is sent. ठीक है. It also gives the place, the distance from where the body has come, the name of the person accompanying the body for protection and identification, the detail of the articles and the clothing with it. ठीक है वो सब उसमें postmortem चालान में लिखा हुआ होता है. The MLO should fill up the column indicating the time of the arrival of the body in the mortuary and the time of the postmortem performed. ठीक है वो कॉलम फिल करके वो उसको साइन कर देता है डेड बॉडी चालान को. Number 3, examination of the police paper. Police डॉक्टर जो है क्या होते हैं please request for the autopsy or it is requested submitted by the investigating police officer जैसे मैंने आपको बताया ये रहे authorization SI SHO in cases of the accident अगर homicide का केस है DCP कर रहा है ठीक है तो वो authorization papers जो है वो लेके आए requisite submitted by the investigating officer to a medical officer while handing over the dead body for the postmortem purpose contains जिसके अंदर क्या मौजूद होगा FIR FIR क्या है फर्स्ट इन्वेस्टिगेशन रिपोर्ट जो होती है आपकी इट इज अ रिपोर्ट in which the available history of the case and the circumstances under which the body was found or recovered or recorded ठीक है ना when there is that the accident suicide or homicide is involved ठीक है body is become that the especially in cases of the homicide body become that the custody of the state ठीक है वहां पे आपका autopsy हर सूरत होना है even in cases of the suicide or the accident ठीक है where the foul play is suspected तो वहां पे body become that the state's property. It is also contained the recorded opinion of the witnesses and the police officers regarding the injuries, manner of their causation, the cause of the death, the identification of the suspect or the foul play, if any. ठीक है the FIR denotes this. Then the inquest report आपका क्या है 3 types of the printed forms होते हैं उसके अंदर upon the appearance manner form A alif B G ठीक है alif क्या है for those type of the death which appears to be natural ठीक है अगर natural deaths हैं तो वो alif के column में आती है inquest report में ठीक है और फॉर्म अलिफ बे में क्या आती हैं फॉर्म बे में होता है फॉर दोज केसेस इन व्हिच डेथ हैज अकर्ड ड्यू टू असॉल्ट ठीक है यानी किसी असॉल्ट की वजह से डेथ हो रही है तो वो बे में आती है जीम क्या है फॉर दोज केसेस इन व्हिच डेथ अपीयर्स टू बी ड्यू टू द पॉइजनिंग ठीक है ना तो वो जीम में आती हैं दीज आर लाइक यू नो काइंड ऑफ ये देखो अलिफ बे बे लाइक असॉल्ट केसेस ठीक है ये असॉल्ट का केस है तो ये फॉर्म नंबर बी है इंक्वेस्ट रिपोर्ट का ठीक है जो इंक्वेस्ट बनाया उसने एफआईआर के साथ इंक्वेस्ट रिपोर्ट जो बनती है ठीक है, इस तरह से होती है, जिसके अंदर सारे डिटेल्स होते हैं, नाम, मकाम, जगह, मर्द, वाक़या हुई, ये नाश बरामद हुई, कहाँ से हुई, ठीक है, फासला कितना था, ठीक है, मौत के मालूम होने की तारीख क्या थी, ठीक है, नाम, वल्दियत क्या था, ठीक है, उम्र क्या थी, मर्द औरत था, ठीक है, हालात, पर्चा जात पुशित, ये सारी चीजें जो उसके यानी ड्रेसेस से रिलेटेड जो उसका मिला वो सब है, ठीक है, चेहरे का तौर यानी color of the face at the time of scene, like you know that they received सर्द पड़ा था, like pale था पूरा, ठीक है, उसके अलावा देखें इसमें लिखा हुआ है एक जख्म, डिटेल ऑफ दैट द असॉल्ट, एक जख्म बाएं कान की तरफ, एक जख्म बाएं कान के नीचे, ठीक है, बाएं बाजू पर एक जख्म, बाएं कंधे पर एक जख्म, रान की तरफ पुश्त पर, ठीक है, on that that the inquest report, then you have to tally with your observations these reports, ठीक है ना, inquests को आप tally करते हैं. Then the number 4 part is that the other formalities of like you know आपका जो autopsy protocols में, that is the identification. Identification autopsy protocol में जब आपने ले लिया, body आ गया, identification आप start करने से पहले you need to identify the body. The dead body should be identified prior to autopsy. This is necessary because in a mortuary where serial autopsies are done, changes of the performing autopsy or the wrong body do exist. ठीक है ना, तो इसलिए identification जरूर कराते हैं. Like sometimes it happens serial number में आगे पीछे हो गया. Beta C was about the poisoning cases. ठीक है, if the history of poisoning cases, some kind of the substance has been taken up, तो उसमें जो है वो C होता है. ठीक है, अच्छा. So for that purpose, like you know, to perform that the autopsy on the wrong body, so आप फिर भी एक दफा identification को confirm करते हैं. वो कैसे करते हैं? This can be prevented by appropriate identification. The body of the deceased should be identified by that the police constable karega ya to who brought it, right name with the address and number of the police officer with the police station. It should also identified by the two relatives with the name and address of the person, signed or the either the sign or the fingerprint. ठीक है ना, इस तरह से identification करवाई जाती है. Then the identification if unknown. ठीक है, अगर चलें जी फर्ज किया अननोन बॉडी मिल रही है, ठीक है, आप उसको ट्रेस आउट भी नहीं कर पाए, पुलिस वाले भी नहीं कर पाए, then number 1 as the police do, note particular of the dress worn and tailor tag, belongings, facial features and identification marks. Note the fingerprint detail, ठीक है, giving an advertisement on the paper. पहला आप ये करते हैं, नादरा से भी इसको टेली कराते हैं, ठीक है. Beta, it's written Bay on it. Look, Bay. ये पर्चा नंबर है, ठीक है. This is Bay, ठीक है. And please let me finish the lecture. फिर उसके बाद आप note down कर लीजिए whatever that the queries you have. Just note it down, and after the completion of like you know. After completion of the lecture, I'll take that the chat box. Okay. ठीक है जी. अच्छा जी, आइडेंटिफिकेशन अननोन में हम इस तरह से कराते हैं, ठीक है. अच्छा, इनिशियल जो है मेडिको लीगल रिपोर्ट और द ट्रीटमेंट नोट अगर कोई है वो आप देखेंगे, वेयर देयर हैज बीन अ period of treatment between an act of violence or between that the accident and death. Such documents are necessary as to establish the doctor to concentrate on the organ or the part of the body most suspected and likely to serve as a guide to retain or send appropriate part to the forensic laboratory. ठीक है बेटा, जैसे basically currently I have gone through with that the one of that the case like उसमें ये हुआ कि the patient was already like you know under treatment of that the cardiac treatment में already चल रहे थे. Then the history of the assault has been done. उनके कोई अपनी partner में कोई heat exchange हुआ, उन्होंने एक दूसरे को मारा वारा, और then after like 2-3 hours his condition started deteriorating. Then he's being admitted to the cardiology and he just went on the vent and finally he died up. The family claimed because of that the injury he died, but like when we just rule it out because of that his cardiac status, that the death was occur because of his unstable cardiac, that the primary reason was which become that the evident was his cardiac scenario. तो बिकॉज उसकी प्रायर हिस्ट्री भी थी, फिर हमने ऑर्गन्स जो है वो उसके भेजे विश्वास वगैरह, देन वी केम अप टू नो कि जी बिकॉज ऑफ दैट द कार्डियक अनस्टेबिलिटी द डेथ, द प्राइमरी रीजन फॉर द डेथ इज दो द ट्रॉमा बिकम दैट द सेकेंडरी कॉज कि उसको डिटोरिएट किया, लेकिन प्राइमरी रीजन जो है वो हार्ट फेलियर ही था. This is that the basically the medical legal form ऐसा होता है जो कि हमें फिल करना होता है being a medical legal expert. PM नंबर आपने डाला, डेट डाला, ठीक है, मेमोरेंडम ऑफ द पोस्टमार्टम हेल्ड एट, कहाँ पे किया, द डेड बॉडी ऑफ डैश बाय कौन लाया, जनरल पर्टिकुलर्स, बाय whom was the car sent, to whom was the car brought, ये सारी चीजें उसके अंदर हमने ऐड ऑन करनी होती है. जैसे मैंने आपको बताया कि पुलिस अफसर जो भी लाया है उसका बेल्ट नंबर, यू हैव टू मेंशन द नेम, द थाना फ्रॉम व्हिच स्टेशन ही जस्ट केम फ्रॉम, ठीक है, बाय whom आइडेंटिफाइड, either the police or by the relatives, ठीक है, उनके address and numbers and sign and stamp, exact time of its receipt, exact time of beginning of the postmortem examination. Like आपने थॉ करने के लिए रखा वो आप अलग मेंशन करेंगे, लेकिन exact जो first incision आप लगाएंगे that is the starting time, ठीक है. Then the completion time, once you're going to stitch the body, handed over, आपका जैसे आपने stitch up कर दिया, completion of the body हो गया. ठीक है जी. सब्सटेंसेस ऑफ द accompanying रिपोर्ट फ्रॉम द पुलिस ऑफिसर, वो सारा हो गया. एक्सटर्नल एग्जामिनेशन में आपने ये सारी चीजें चेक करनी होती हैं. डिस्क्रिप्शन ऑफ द क्लोथ्स, ऑर्नामेंट्स, कंडीशन ऑफ द बॉडी, स्पेशल मार्क ओवर द स्किन, कंडीशन ऑफ द क्लोथ, राइगर मोटिव्स, जनरल डिस्क्रिप्शन और फीचर ऑफ द एक्सटर्नल एंड साइन ऑफ द कंपोजिशन प्रेजेंस. पोस्टमार्टम लिविडिटी चेक करेंगे, पोजीशन ऑफ द टंग, स्टेट ऑफ द पीपल, oozing from the any kind of the oozings from the mouth or the nostrils etc. ये सब चेक किए जाते हैं. इस तरह का होता है परफॉर्म, ठीक है. Then there are the skull cavity, vertebrae, ठीक है. फिर brain, spinal cord, ये सब एग्जामिन किया हुआ है इन्होंने. cranium and the spinal cord किया हुआ है, ठीक है. wall rib cage, thorax एग्जामिन किया है इन्होंने पूरा, ठीक है, हेल्दी है. लेफ्ट लंग इंजर्ड था, पेरिकार्डियम एंड हार्ट इंजर्ड था, ब्लड वेसल्स हेल्दी मिले, ठीक है. इस तरह से वॉल्स एब्डामन की आपके ये सारे एग्जामिनेशन हुई, ठीक है. इंजरी क्या मिली, एज मेंशन इन द इंजरी शीट, ठीक है. डिजीज और द डिफॉर्मिटी कोई भी नहीं मिला, ठीक है. In my opinion, the deceased dies due to the injury to the left lung and the heart due to firearm. ये firearm का केस था, ठीक है. इसमें wound of entry and exit वो सब लिखा होगा. कट लाइंस ऑफ द ह्यूमन हेड्स, ये आप इंजरीज मेंशन करने के लिए बताते हैं कि कहाँ पे आपने इंजरीज आपको मिल रही हैं. जैसे ये देखिए, नंबर वुंड ऑफ एंट्री ये रहा नंबर 1 एंड वुंड ऑफ एग्जिट ये रहा नंबर 2. ये आपके पास एक परफॉर्मा की शक्ल में होते हैं. दीज आर द फॉर्म्स ऑन व्हिच यू जस्ट डिफाइन द एक्सटर्नल फाइंडिंग्स ऑफ योर्स, ठीक है. Place of performing the autopsy, that is the mortuary is a room or a building usually part of the hospital to which dead bodies are taken to be kept for until their burial or some other disposal. Autopsy room is that part of the mortuary where dead bodies are dissected. ठीक है, इस तरह के rooms होते हैं, ठीक है. This is that the internationally here we have that the not that much advanced enough, लेकिन इसी तरह के electronic tables होते हैं, metallic tables होते हैं जिनके ऊपर रखा जाता है. We have that the different blocks through which we can just settle that the body for opening that skull and scalp, ठीक है. और underneath रखने के लिए जो है, when you will just go for that the spinal dissection to make that the body more prominent and up enough under the chest, blocks different रखे जाते हैं, ठीक है. This is the table. इसमें drainage system already होता है, hydraulic system होती है. Light should be very much appropriate. Daylight में हमेशा autopsy perform होना चाहिए. So you will be able to identify that the each and every minor details of the injuries, इंस्ट्रूमेंटेशन कॉमनली जो कि यूज किए जाते हैं ऑटोप्सी रूम में, सर्जिकल ब्लेड्स हैं, सिजर्स हैं, प्रोब्स, डिसेक्टिंग फोर्सेप्स हैं, कार्टिलेज नाइफ है, रिब शेड्स हैं, चीजल्स हैं, हैमर, सॉ, बोन फोर्सेप्स, skull, albetus and brain. These instrument you can see at any of our museum, like ये आपको पढ़ाए भी जाते हैं tutorial में. So by seeing these the पूरा एक stylized tray होती है, ठीक है, और electronic saw होती है to open that the skull, ठीक, वो भी already मौजूद होती है, grinders type की होती हैं skull open करने के लिए, ठीक है. So these instruments can be seen or appreciated by at the Department of Forensic Medicine at museum, आप देख सकते हैं either DMC or DIMC. उसके अलावा surgical hand materials होते हैं, preservatives होते हैं different, ठीक है, labeling sealing materials and jars होते हैं, ठीक है, जो आप जिसके अंदर भेजते हैं. So thank you very much. This is all about the today's lecture. Next time we are going to start with the external examination. So if you have any question, inquiry, or feel free to just ask. बेटा बिकॉज पैथोलॉजिकल मैंने आपको बताया कि हम सिर्फ और सिर्फ कोर्स ऑफ द डिजीज और टू रूल आउट उसको देखने के लिए कर रहे होते हैं. दैट इज द थिंग, उसको कोर्ट में ले जाने की जरूरत ही नहीं होती है, बिकॉज दैट इज नॉट दैट द फॉल्ट ऑफ द डॉक्टर, दैट इज द नॉर्मल कोर्स ऑफ द डिजीज व्हिच causes the death of the person. This is only helpful to further the future perspectives, you can give that the new trials, new drugs can be formulated कि जी ये course of treatment दिया गया, इस पे ये drug ने effect नहीं किया, तो इस drug को इस level तक advancement होना चाहिए. तो pharmaceuticals के लिए वो बहुत ही अच्छा aspect होता है. Yes, we called it second autopsy, हम उसको कहते हैं exhumed body पे जो किया जाता है. Exhumations जो होते हैं, exhumed bodies basically होते वही हैं कि sometimes it happened that it work as the second autopsy, or sometimes the people claim after the burial कि जी the foul play has been done. तो उसमें भी exhumation, उसमें भी proper यही procedure protocols होते हैं, but that autopsy being established there at the graveyard, ठीक है ना, वो उधर ही उसको build किया जाता है cordon off करके, वहां पे ये सारा process जो है वो किया जाता है, जो कि हम autopsy room में करते हैं.